Welcome to Lawyers Coach. My name is Claire Rayson, and each episode will feature myself or Oliver Hansard, both of us coaches and former lawyers, trying to find out what makes lawyers tick. We'll be hearing from various guests and experts, and then at the end of each episode, we will both be reflecting on what they said. In this episode, Oliver Hansard talks to Alice Stephenson, founder of Stephenson Law. Alice is a lawyer who isn't afraid of controversy, and it's something that she talks to Oliver about. Alice and Oliver also talk about 2020, and in particular how it's given her a platform to push forward her agenda of humanising the law.
So it's Oliver Hansard here from the Lawyers Coach podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to have founder and CEO of Stephenson Law, Alice Stephenson, here with me today. Great to have you here, and thanks for coming onto the podcast.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So, Alice, I read that you were desperate to become a lawyer. I'm really intrigued by that. How did that desperation develop?
It's a good question, and I don't know if I really know the answer. I think I was working in human resources at the time, so that was sort of my first career. But quite quickly realised that wasn't really where I wanted to spend a huge amount more time, and kind of thinking about other options and law. I just kind of got stuck on law really. But obviously getting a training contract and starting a career in law is really challenging, and I think you have to have a certain amount of drive and ambition to be able to kind of put the effort required in to be able to get a career in law off the ground, really.
And so you had to do those qualifications whilst you were working your HR role?
No, so I wanted to go back to university and do the GDL and the LPC full time, but I couldn't afford to stop working because I had a young daughter at the time. So the only way that I was going to be able to do it was to get sponsorship from one of the larger law firms that give you a training contract, but also sponsor you to go back to university and pay your tuition fees and pay your maintenance grant. So I had quite a lot of pressure, I suppose, to be able to secure a certain type of training contract to be able to do it at all. And I managed to do it, but it definitely wasn't easy. I didn't do very well in my A-levels because I was 7 months pregnant when I took my A-levels. And lots of law firms still look at A-level grades when they're looking at, who to give the training contracts to. So it was a challenge, but I did manage to get an offer with Bond Pierce, who are now Womble Bond Dickinson. And that made it possible for me to go back to university and study law.
And so what was next for you?
So then I went to another commercial firm in Bristol and did just a commercial law NQ job. I did leave after about 18 months and went to another firm and did a commercial role, and it was very similar. And I quickly realised that the environment was not really right for me. It wasn't that they were necessarily doing anything wrong as such, but it just wasn't really what I wanted to be, where I wanted to be spending my time.
And then moved in-house. And did you enjoy that environment over the law firm culture?
I wouldn't say that I enjoyed the environment anymore. I think I enjoyed having a bit more freedom and control and flexibility over my work.
And was this freedom and control that you just mentioned, was that part of what then led you to set up your own law firm?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess to a certain extent. I mean, I had that with obviously being a consultant, and I think I probably had a bit more freedom and control as a consultant than I do now, because now I've got a team of 20 people and I've got lots and lots of clients, and so I've got a lot more responsibility now than I had when I was an independent consultant. But certainly one of the things that really drove me to starting my own law firm was to be able to build something. I think I really wanted to build something and build a team and a culture that reflected my values and reflected the way that I kind of thought a law firm should be running.
And that culture and those values, how would you articulate what you've created in that sense?
I guess we've stepped away from a lot of the traditional archaic perspectives and stereotypes associated with the legal industry, and building a culture and a team that's much more focused on individuality. I think that's something that's really important to me, and something that I've struggled with in corporate law, is the fact that, as you know, you're not really seen as an individual. You're not encouraged to express your own values, your own personality. You're kind of expected to, I had somebody use the phrase, paint yourself grey at the door. Is that kind of expectation. So we've really tried to step away from all of that, and embrace a kind of much more inclusive, a much more diverse, and a much more innovative approach to the way that we operate. Much more like the kind of tech startup culture that, you know, we see in a lot of the clients that we work with, than a traditional law firm culture.
So how does that feel different then to a client as they're receiving the work that you do? What would be different in the way that you deliver that work and you operate to one of these grey law firms?
I mean, we make a very conscious effort in the way that we communicate with our clients to not alienate ourselves through the use of legal terminology that can't be easily understood. The documents that we draft, everything is very much drafted in plain English so that our clients can understand everything that's said to them. There was a recent article about Clifford Chance updating all of their documents to be gender neutral. I mean, to me, that's just a bit late in the day, really. I mean, we've never had documents that aren't gender neutral. That's just the way that we've always operated. So I think from a client's perspective, it's what we try and do is make everything just a bit more human, and so they feel like they're working with a human being that they know, that they trust, that they understand, and that's a kind of mutually beneficial relationship. And that in terms of the legal advice that we're providing, we're actually kind of making it all as straightforward as possible for them. And
do you get feedback from those clients that it's working and that it's different to other providers?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we do get feedback from them saying that, what we're trying to achieve, they're recognizing that in terms of the service that they're receiving.
And do you think that challenger firms like yours are putting pressure on the more established firms to make those sorts of changes as well?
I would like to think so, but I'm not sure that is the case yet, if I'm honest. I think there's a lot of things that should be putting pressure on law firms to change, and that's been the case for a long time. But I think law firms are very, very slow to respond and slow to change, and I'm not sure that they are feeling that pressure quite yet.
Even with what's gone on in 2020 in terms of COVID and the change in working styles, do you not think that? Well,
I mean, that's obviously put us, a different pressure on them, for sure. But I guess that's different to the pressure that we're putting on them as competitors.
But I can imagine what you're also offering is a different experience for the people that come and work for you.
Yeah.
And maybe if anything good has come out of 2020, it's that people have realised that flexible working does work. I mean, maybe there's an opportunity there for the established law firms.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I'm not sure how well they're doing it. I think there's a kind of a real broad spectrum of how law firms have adjusted to flexible working and remote working. And you hear good stories and you hear bad stories about it. I think hopefully it will drive a positive change in the industry as a whole. I very much hope that it does. but I guess, we'll have to wait a little bit longer to see how that pans out.
Why do you feel that there might be some firms that just revert to type, and as soon as they are able, go back to pre-2020 ways of working?
Yeah, I think so.
And that's a great opportunity for you, particularly in terms of clients who've appreciated your style of working, I would have thought, moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think, this year has certainly been challenging for everybody, but I think it has given us a real opportunity to show how we are really very different, and an opportunity to set ourselves even further apart from the other traditional law firms in the market. And we've grown a lot this year. We've grown from 12 to 21, 22 people. So, at a time where lots of law firms are making redundancies and cutting salaries and furloughing staff, actually we've experienced 25% increase in our revenue. So we've grown a lot.
So where do you think you'll focus in 2021 in terms of demonstrating the difference between you and other ways of receiving legal services?
We've got lots of plans for next year. Part of that is focused on the human side of our business, bringing in brilliant lawyers, and expanding our depth and breadth of expertise. And then part of that is focusing on the technology side of our business, both from an internal perspective to make sure that we are working as efficiently as possible, and also in how we use technology to engage with our clients, and optimizing that as much as possible, really.
Do they have an expectation of that you'll bring those sorts of technologies into how you deliver the legal services?
Yeah, certainly the tech companies that we work with do have that expectation, yeah.
And you've got a really strong digital presence as a firm, and as an individual as well. How do you think other law firms could learn from using digital marketing to just demonstrate different ways in which they operate?
Oh, well, I talk about this actually because law firm marketing is just so boring. It's awful. You just see like stock photos of people in meetings and shaking hands and updates about changes in law, and it's all so dry and boring. And I would just really like to see a bit more personality and diversity put into the marketing efforts, I think, and just a bit more of humanizing the lawyers behind the law, because that's what people are interested in. That's what people engage in.
Do you think then maybe lawyers are just frightened to be authentic? Do you think there's a risk of that?
Lawyers are frightened of expressing an opinion that somebody might not agree with, I think. I mean, obviously not all lawyers, but I think as a generalization, people feel worried about putting an opinion out there on social media, because if somebody doesn't agree with that opinion, then that could reflect badly on them. It could reflect badly on their employer. It could lose them a client. I think there's very much a kind of pressure on lawyers to try and be everything to everyone and to please everybody, and to not say or do anything that could offend or upset anybody, which is why, even just down to having tattoos on show in case that offends somebody, or having your nose pierced, or having your hair dyed blue. It's like none of this is viewed as acceptable within the profession, because it might upset somebody.
Sorry, that was a siren just roaring through the West End there, so apologies for that. Alice, you wrote a piece recently that I thought was fascinating about mistakes and the importance of mistakes for lawyers to learn. I think, in the context of what you were saying about being honest and being yourself, that was quite a brave piece to write, I thought.
I don't really consider it to be brave. I think out of some, the content that I've put out there, that's probably one of my least controversial ones. I don't know. But you know what, it's something that really needs to be talked about in our industry, and And I'm seeing some other people talking about it as well. I was recently involved in a box set with Crafty Counsel where they sort of talked to me and some other lawyers about making mistakes. The fact that this is a taboo subject within our industry, I think, just goes to show some of the real cultural and systemic issues that we have within our industry. Because, you know, in most industries, in most professions, it's accepted that people make mistakes, and that's all part of learning, and that's, you know, just the way that it is. And we have to deal with that, and we have to manage it, and we have to support people, and we have to talk about it, and we have to share experiences and all of that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, it just doesn't happen in the way that it should do in the legal industry.
And also, I imagine clients appreciate that their lawyers are human, and that mistakes will emerge. And maybe it's lawyers learning to appreciate that, and that, you know, if they're open and honest about the things they get wrong, that'll be well received by clients.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I've made mistakes as a lawyer. We've made mistakes as a law firm, the majority of which, you know, never get to the client because we have the systems and the checks in place to pick those up. But every so often mistakes do get to the client, and that's, you can never avoid that 100%. But what really matters is how you handle those mistakes and how you deal with them. And that's kind of what I say to the junior lawyers in my team, is what sets the good lawyers apart from the bad lawyers is not necessarily the number of mistakes that you make, but it's how you handle those mistakes, taking ownership of them, and doing what you can to fix them as quickly as possible. That's what really matters. I mean, obviously, we don't want to see people making the same mistakes over and over again. They've got to be seen as part of a learning journey. But I just think that management of mistakes is a skill that is not talked or taught about enough, because we almost want to pretend that they just don't happen in the first place.
And it's a skill in itself, isn't it, to manage those difficult points in a relationship?
Yeah. You
said that talking about mistakes was one of the least controversial things you think you write about. What's at the other end of the spectrum then that you would consider a controversial topic that you're talking about?
I do talk quite a lot about, you know, tattoos in the industry. That's always quite a lively debate when I talk about that. Quite polarized opinions on whether or not, you know, lawyers should be showing, you know, have visible tattoos or not, whether it's unprofessional.
You've got a beautiful sleeve of tattoos that you're not shy in sharing on social media and on your website. How has the existence of that impacted you and the way you're perceived in the industry? I
mean, it certainly makes me stand out in the industry, I think. In a good way. I think, you know, I decided fairly shortly after starting my own business that I wasn't going to cover up my tattoos anymore. And that was a conscious decision after having for years felt the pressure to cover them up. And I think after I made that decision, I was really surprised by the response. Clients responded really positively to it, actually. I had lots and lots of nice comments. And I think, you know, people were just generally really quite surprised to see a lawyer with so many tattoos, and found it sort of quite a refreshing change, I think, to dealing with lawyers in suits who, you know, don't look like me really. So, you know, there are people that don't like them. There are people that don't approve of me having my tattoos on show, and I don't really, you know, care what they think, to be honest, because for me and for my clients and for my team, it's definitely been a positive step. So, you know, that's something that I talk a lot about. And I also talk about sexism and gender inequality in the industry, you know, why so many female lawyers leave the industry, why only 25% of partners are women, but 50% of lawyers are women. Where are they all going, and why are they all going?
Have you got a sense of what the industry can do to reverse that trend?
There's lots of reasons why women leave the industry, and obviously it's something that I could talk about for hours, really. But I think one of the biggest problems is that women reach a point where they kind of feel like they want to have a family, but they don't feel that they can manage their family and manage their career, because it's hard, and lots of law firms don't give women the support that they need to be able to do both, which causes lots of women to leave. I trained and qualified alongside 3 other women, and all of them have left. I'm the only female lawyer left in my year of qualification, in my training group.
And it's a massive loss of potential to the industry and the economy when you've got all these skills that women are learning, and then they're just not finding the platform on which to use them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it's a loss to the economy as such, because a lot of these women are going off and they're doing other things, and they're doing really interesting things. I think it's certainly a loss to the law firms that are losing them.
But definitely it's got to be to the industry, because you start to have a less rounded view of legal issues and how to solve them. If we have all these women falling away over time, then you get a lopsided perspective on how the law should operate. I mean, to my mind, that's pretty critical.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And have you got particular things that you do in the firm to enable people to stay and succeed?
Yeah, I mean, we're a relatively small business. And we're quite fluid and agile in the way that we work. We obviously all work remotely. We all work flexibly. We don't kind of clock watch people to make sure that everybody's switched on at 9 o'clock. If somebody wants to go and pick up their children, take their children to school, they can just go and do it. We don't mind, as long as the work's being done. So I think we don't micromanage people. We don't watch over people's shoulders. And we know that everybody works really hard. It is a challenging job to do. So I think you just have to have that flexibility to be able to run it alongside having a family and the demands of having a family.
So looking forward then into 2021, 2020 has been a tough year for all of us. How optimistic are you for your business and the legal industry moving into 2021?
I am really optimistic for our business. We've got some really exciting things planned for 2021. We've got some new people starting with new areas of expertise and new clients. We've got new projects in the pipeline. We are launching a content platform for startups in Q1 as well. So yeah, we've got lots of really exciting things happening. So we're expecting to see us continuing on our growth trajectory for sure.
And do you think you're going to have many of the larger firms copying the types of things that you're doing? Do you think, in terms of particularly ways of working and client relationships, do you think they'll be watching you and trying to introduce some of those things into the way they operate?
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I don't know if they decide to, whether it's a result of them seeing what we're doing, or if it's just common sense responding to the market, responding to client demands. I think we're in a strong position that we can do these things because we're a young company. We're a small company, so we can make decisions very quickly. We can adapt very quickly. So I think a big traditional law firm is not going to be able to look at us and try and replicate what we're doing, because it just wouldn't be possible for them to work in the same way that we work. But that being said, the legal industry as a whole is obviously shifting towards more remote, flexible, agile working. Technology, legal tech is making a big difference to the way that law firms are working at the moment. So there is change happening. I just think as a business, we are changing a lot faster than the bigger, more traditional firms out there.
Alice, you've been absolutely brilliant. Thanks ever so much for coming on to the podcast and being so candid. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I wish you well in your plans for 2021.
Thank you so much. It was nice chatting to you.
So that was Oliver talking to Alice Stephenson of Stephenson Law. And Oliver joins me now. Oliver, it's quite interesting that when you asked Alice what the most controversial thing that she kind of is pushed on, and her response was tattoos.
Yeah, that did surprise me, I must confess. And she used that phrase about, grey lawyers, and maybe that really brings that point out that it, to succeed in the legal industry, the model previously has been one of having to cover up one's personality, one's tattoos in her case, to succeed, because greyness is what's expected. And I think that's a real shame.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you mentioned there the covering up, and it's something that in 2020, I think was really a focus, because I think that lots of this wrapping, lots of the things that were covered up were all of a sudden not there anymore. And perhaps Alice is a perfect example of how, when you be authentic, when you can be yourself, clients respond positively.
And she's got that real mission to make the law firm environment more human. And I think that's both for those people working within her organisation, but be human in the face of clients as well. And good on her. I think it's a really exciting and brave move, but I'm sure it's one that clients will be drawn to, pretty much from the start.
And I think, the other thing that Alice spoke about in the context of controversy was, how to handle mistakes. And I think, what she was getting at there is that, lawyers still don't talk about making mistakes. And of course, you don't hire a lawyer so that they get things wrong. But, things happen, and mistakes sometimes do happen. And actually refreshing to hear from the founder of a firm to say that that's okay. It's not about, the mistakes you make. It's about how you deal with them and how you respond to those, and about having a culture where, mistakes are something that can be shared and talked about and corrected.
I think that's right. And I think there's something in there about learning from those mistakes is absolutely critical. I think there's also something about creating the environment in the firm where it's okay, you learn from it, and we course correct. But she was also clear, let's be realistic, that she's got the controls in place to manage that, so that mistakes aren't received by the client. And maybe what she's getting at is getting that balance right between learning as somebody inside the firm, but having the ability to, in the face of the client, deliver high quality work.
So, Ollie, thanks ever so much for taking the time to interview Alice. It's a fascinating conversation.
Not a problem, it was a real pleasure.
And thank you for listening, and we hope that you join us on the next episode of Lawyers Coach.
Lawyers Coach is brought to you by Client Talk and Hansard Coaching. If you're enjoying this series, please rate us on your podcast provider so that others can find us. If you're a lawyer and would like to take part in Lawyers Coach, please visit our website lawyercoach.co.uk for further details. And you can also join the conversation on our LinkedIn group Lawyers Coach. If there are any topics you'd like to hear us discuss, then just get in touch.